today by looking at the topic of global modernism and identity. This is a selection of artworks who fit the profile of a global modernism, but who also speak to issues and concerns of identity. In some instances, this is because of race, gender, class, or ethnicity. It speaks to the oppression, exploitation, discrimination that individuals may experience. Also, the power of the artist to reveal, expose, or transform our thinking about these conditions through visual expression. We'll start by looking at the piece Stadia 2 by Julie Mretu. We looked at this piece in Unit 10. Here we see she's overlaid elements from architectural plans, diagrams, maps of the urban environment, along with abstract forms and personal notations. These compositions start to create a kind of energy and a chaos that's echoed by today's globalized world. Stadia 2 is part of a triptych of works. A triptych, remember, is a series of 3 works that go together and explores themes such as nationalism and revolution as they occur in the worlds of art, sports, and contemporary politics. She's especially interested in the process of image construction. This would be considered a collaborative work because these are very large scale. She'll often employ other assistants who are artists, in fact, a whole team who may assist her with the design process. They'll layer these composite images made up of different maps. Depicting these patterns of movement, Mretu emphasizes on one hand the militarization of bodies moving within and between national or digital spaces, and acknowledges this kind of speed at which our world is moving now. What connections would you see between the works Electronic Superhighway by Nam June Paik and Stadia 2 by Julie Mretu? I'm going to give you a moment now to think about this for our live lesson discussion that we'll be having. We'll move on to looking at the work The Swing after Fragonard. This is a recreation of Fragonard's Rococo painting, The Swing, and here it's depicted as an installation piece. Remember, an installation is where an artist uses the whole space of a museum or a gallery. In this piece, the difference is the head is missing. This is a reference to the fate of Marie Antoinette at a time of revolution in France. Here we could be the voyeur if we choose. We could assume the position of the suitor if we wish. Schonenbar is Nigerian but born in England. An interesting perspective on England and its former colonies in Nigeria. He exposes an interesting commercial relationship. The Dutch were not able to sell Eastern-style fabrics in Asia, so they redirected their markets to West African culture, along with their trade route. These fabrics then became known as Dutch wax fabrics, and they act as a symbol of African culture. Some people perceive these patterns to be indigenous and a symbol of our post-colonial material world, for those who may understand the complexities of their origins. How would you compare a piece like this, The Swing after Schonenbar, with Dancing at the Louvre? Here we have Faith Ringgold's piece that is acrylic on canvas, tie-dyed. It has a fabric border, so this would be considered a quilt-like story that she creates. We'll give you a minute to think about how you might compare and contrast the issues that they're dealing with in these two works. We'll also discuss a piece, Shibboleth, by Doris Salcedo. She's a Colombian artist, and she produced this work, shows a deep meandering crack in the floor. Despite its unassuming nature, it defies a very neat description. It exists in some kind of limbo between sculpture and installation. Remember, after the exhibition ended, the scar in the floor still remains when it was patched up. She has offered few explanations beyond stating how this fissure represents the immigrant experience in Europe, notably the racial segregation that marks people from the third world as the other, a permanent state of being apart. The word shibboleth is a Hebrew term, a custom, principle, or belief distinguishing a particular class or group of people, especially a long-standing one, regarded as outmoded or no longer important. So the title in this piece is very telling. How would we compare a work like that with a piece like The Gates by Jean-Claude and Christo? Or let's say with the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Since we looked at all three of these works, I'd like you to consider, for our discussion, some comparisons and some contrasts as well. Here we're looking at The Old Man's Cloth by El Anatsui. This is a large wall hanging. The artist is an African born from Ghana, but he lived in Nigeria. There's a long history of textile with kente cloth. Making this cloth would have been a communal activity, like El Anatsui, who uses hired workers. So when he's creating a piece like this, he employs people in his workshop who are involved in the craft of combining and fabricating these large-scale works. A wall hanging that appears different each time you see it. The curators are instructed to hang and display it with the freedom they choose. The use of recyclia, or found materials, is the form or the medium that's used for production. They are labels from liquor bottles that have been pounded flat and then wired together. The tradition of pouring out libations to honor ancestors is part of the African tradition, as well as the idea of the sumsum, that everything has a kind of energy or vitality transferred to the object. Now, how would we compare a piece like The Old Man's Cloth with one of your favorites, Pisupo, which is Corned Beef by Michael Tuffrey? I'm going to give you this PowerPoint ahead of time so you could review the works for our live lesson discussion that we will be having later this week.